What happens when a former president faces the possibility of losing control over his own assets? Bank accounts, real estate, even brand-linked properties. In recent years, legal judgments and financial penalties have raised serious questions about how asset seizure works and what is actually at risk when courts get involved. Asset seizure is often misunderstood, especially when it appears in headlines involving high-profile individuals or large financial cases. For many people, the phrase suggests something sudden, an image of assets being taken away overnight. In reality, that is rarely how the process works. Asset seizure is not an instant event. It is a structured legal mechanism used by courts to enforce financial judgments, fines, or penalties after a legal decision has been made. In civil cases, courts may determine that a party owes a specific amount of money. If that amount is not paid voluntarily, enforcement procedures can begin. These procedures are designed to collect what the court has ruled is owed, not to punish, but to enforce compliance. The first steps often involve identifying and evaluating assets. This can include bank accounts, financial holdings, or physical property. In some situations, courts may issue orders that restrict the movement of funds or temporarily freeze certain accounts while legal processes continue. Importantly, asset seizure does not automatically mean total loss. Many enforcement actions are partial, targeted, and closely regulated. Assets may remain under the original owner's name while being legally restricted or monitored. Another critical element is timing. Appeals, legal motions, and compliance negotiations can significantly delay or alter enforcement. In many cases, these processes unfold over months or even years. Understanding this framework is essential because it shows that asset seizure is not arbitrary. It follows established legal procedures, oversight, and due process. Rather than a dramatic single moment, asset seizure is better understood as a gradual, step-by-step system designed to ensure that court rulings are carried out within the boundaries of the law. In Donald Trump's case, public attention has increasingly focused on a series of civil judgments and financial rulings connected to his business operations. These developments have raised questions about how courts evaluate high-value assets and enforce large monetary decisions. It is important to begin with a clear distinction. These matters are not criminal forfeitures. They are civil enforcement actions, which operate under a different legal standard and follow a separate process. According to court findings, certain business practices were examined as part of civil litigation. In civil cases, courts are tasked with reviewing financial records, valuation methods, and contractual representations to determine whether legal obligations were met. When a court rules that financial penalties or damages are owed, the focus shifts from determining liability to ensuring compliance with the judgment. In this context, Trump's assets have come under scrutiny not because of political status, but because of their scale and complexity. Large business portfolios often include a combination of real estate holdings, corporate entities, licensing agreements, and brand-related revenue streams. Each of these components can be evaluated differently under civil law. Court rulings may require detailed financial disclosures to assess the ability to pay or to determine how enforcement should proceed. This process can involve reviewing bank accounts, property valuations, and ownership structures. Such reviews are standard in high-value civil cases and are not unique to public figures. Asset seizure is often misunderstood, especially when it appears in headlines involving high-profile individuals or large financial cases. For many people, the phrase suggests something sudden, an image of assets being taken away overnight. In reality, that is rarely how the process works. Asset seizure is not an instant event. It is a structured legal mechanism used by courts to enforce financial judgments, fines, or penalties after a legal decision has been made. In civil cases, courts may determine that a party owes a specific amount of money. If that amount is not paid voluntarily, enforcement procedures can begin. These procedures are designed to collect what the court has ruled is owed, not to punish, but to enforce compliance. The first steps often involve identifying and evaluating assets. This can include bank accounts, financial holdings, or physical property. In some situations, courts may issue orders that restrict the movement of funds or temporarily freeze certain accounts while legal processes continue. Importantly, asset seizure does not automatically mean total loss. Many enforcement actions are partial, targeted, and closely regulated. Assets may remain under the original owner's name while being legally restricted or monitored. Another critical element is timing. Appeals, legal motions, and compliance negotiations can significantly delay or alter enforcement. In many cases, these processes unfold over months or even years. Understanding this framework is essential because it shows that asset seizure is not arbitrary. It follows established legal procedures, oversight, and due process. Rather than a dramatic single moment, asset seizure is better understood as a gradual, step-by-step system designed to ensure that court rulings are carried out within the boundaries of the law. When courts seek to enforce financial judgments, liquid assets are often examined first. Liquid assets are funds or holdings that can be accessed or converted into cash relatively quickly, making them the most practical starting point for enforcement actions. This category commonly includes bank accounts, brokerage accounts, and other cash-equivalent holdings. Because these assets are already in monetary form, they can be more easily measured, restricted, or allocated towards satisfying court-ordered payments. According to standard legal procedures, courts may issue orders that temporarily freeze certain accounts. These measures are designed to prevent large transfers or withdrawals while legal processes, such as appeals or compliance reviews, are ongoing. A freeze does not necessarily mean funds are taken immediately. In many cases, it simply limits movement until the court determines the next steps. This process follows established rules and is typically overseen by financial institutions, which are legally required to comply with court directives. Banks and brokerage firms act as intermediaries, ensuring that restrictions are applied accurately and within the scope of the order. Importantly, not all funds within an account are always subject to restriction. Courts may specify amounts, timeframes, or categories of funds that are affected. In some situations, exemptions apply, allowing access to limited funds for operational expenses or legally protected uses. While cases involving well-known individuals often attract attention, this process is not unique to public figures. Corporations, executives, small business owners, and private citizens can all be subject to similar enforcement procedures following civil judgments. In large corporate cases, account reviews are routine, particularly when multiple entities or subsidiaries are involved. Courts may examine how funds move between accounts, how revenues are distributed, and how obligations are structured. The visibility of high-profile cases can sometimes create the impression that extraordinary measures are being taken. In reality, the same legal principles apply regardless of the individual or organization involved. The difference lies mainly in scale, not in procedure. Understanding why liquid assets are prioritized helps clarify how enforcement works in practice. Courts aim to balance fairness, efficiency, and legal compliance while ensuring that judgments are respected. Rather than signaling immediate loss, account restrictions are typically an early step in a longer legal process. They reflect caution and oversight, not sudden confiscation, and they operate within a framework designed to protect due process for all parties involved. Real estate presents a more complex challenge when courts evaluate assets for enforcement. Unlike cash or financial accounts, property involves layers of ownership, financing, and legal structure that must be carefully examined before any action can be taken. One of the most important distinctions is the difference between ownership and control. Holding an ownership interest in a property does not always mean having full authority over it. Many properties are governed by shared agreements, financial obligations, or legal entities that limit how they can be managed or transferred. In high-value portfolios, properties may be jointly owned by multiple parties. In these cases, a court must consider the rights of other owners who are not involved in the legal dispute. This often restricts what portion of a property, if any, can be used to satisfy a judgment. Another key factor is financing. Many large properties are mortgaged, sometimes through complex lending arrangements. Lenders typically hold priority claims, meaning they must be paid before any other financial obligations are addressed. As a result, the presence of outstanding loans can significantly affect how much equity is actually available. Properties may also be held through corporate entities, partnerships, or trusts. This structure is common in commercial real estate and large business operations. While these arrangements can serve legitimate business purposes, they also add legal complexity when courts review assets. In cases involving well-known brands, some properties may be linked to licensing or branding agreements rather than direct ownership. For example, a branded property may use a name under contract, while ownership remains with a separate entity. This distinction is critical, as branding rights and physical property are treated differently under the law. Examples often discussed in public reporting include commercial buildings, golf resorts, and branded developments. Each category carries unique legal and financial considerations, ranging from zoning regulations to long-term operational agreements. Because of these complexities, courts cannot simply take a building in the way cash might be collected from an account. Instead, they must navigate existing ownership structures, contractual obligations, and outstanding loans. This process typically involves detailed valuations, legal reviews, and negotiations with lenders or co-owners. It is methodical and often time-consuming, reflecting the need to protect the rights of all parties involved. Understanding this distinction helps explain why real estate enforcement moves slowly and cautiously. The goal is not disruption, but lawful compliance within a framework that balances financial accountability with legal protections. One of the most overlooked aspects of asset evaluation is brand value. Unlike physical property or financial accounts, a brand is an intangible asset, one that exists through public perception, contractual agreements, and long-term business relationships. In Donald Trump's case, the Trump name itself has been used across a wide range of ventures. According to publicly available information, it has been connected to licensing agreements, partnerships, and branding arrangements in real estate, hospitality, and other commercial sectors. In many of these arrangements, the brand is not the same as the physical asset. A building may carry a name under a licensing contract, while ownership and daily operations remain with a separate entity. This distinction is important because branding rights and physical property are treated differently under civil law. Brand value is particularly difficult to seize or directly collect. Unlike a bank account or a building, a brand cannot be easily divided, transferred, or sold through standard enforcement mechanisms. There is often no clear market transaction that allows a court to assign immediate monetary value. However, while brand value is hard to seize, it can still be affected by legal judgments. Court rulings and financial penalties may influence how a brand is monetized in the future. Licensing partners may reassess agreements, and new deals may be structured more cautiously. In addition, ongoing legal matters can introduce uncertainty. For businesses that rely on brand recognition and reputation, uncertainty can be just as impactful as direct financial loss. This may affect revenue streams tied to endorsements, naming rights, or long-term partnerships. Another factor is contract structure. Brand agreements often include clauses related to legal disputes, financial stability, or reputational considerations. These clauses can determine whether agreements continue unchanged, are renegotiated, or are ended altogether. From a legal perspective, courts generally focus on enforceable assets rather than reputational impact. However, the indirect effects of enforcement can extend well beyond the courtroom. Market perception, partner confidence, and public visibility all play a role in shaping a brand's long-term value. This is why reputation risk often matters as much as financial loss. Even when physical assets remain intact, changes in how a brand is perceived can influence future opportunities.
Understanding the difference between brand value and physical assets helps clarify why some consequences are less visible but potentially long-lasting. While buildings and accounts are measured in numbers, brand value is measured in trust, recognition, and ongoing relationships.
In complex financial cases, these intangible factors can shape outcomes just as powerfully as the tangible ones. Asset seizure is rarely a fast process.
In most cases, enforcement unfolds over an extended period, shaped by appeals, procedural requirements, and ongoing legal review. After a civil judgment is issued, the affected party typically has the right to appeal. An appeal does not automatically overturn a ruling, but it can pause or modify how enforcement proceeds while higher courts review the case.
This review process can take months, and in complex financial cases, sometimes years. During this period, courts often aim to balance two priorities.
On one hand, they seek to protect the rights of the party appealing the decision. On the other, they must ensure that a valid judgment is not undermined by delay or asset movement. To manage this balance, courts may impose temporary conditions.
One common requirement is the posting of a bond.
A bond serves as a financial guarantee that funds will be available if the original judgment is upheld.
It does not represent an admission of wrongdoing, but rather a safeguard to preserve the court's authority. Courts may also require detailed financial disclosures.
These disclosures help establish transparency by outlining assets, liabilities, and income streams.
They allow the court to assess whether assets are being maintained appropriately during the appeals process. Another element is ongoing compliance reporting.
In some cases, individuals or entities must regularly update the court on financial activity, ownership changes, or major transactions.
This reporting helps prevent sudden asset transfers that could complicate enforcement later.
These measures are procedural rather than punitive. They are designed to maintain stability while legal questions are resolved. For high-value cases, especially those involving multiple assets or entities, this oversight can be extensive. The length of this process can be frustrating for all parties involved.
However, delays are not unusual and do not necessarily indicate a final outcome.
They reflect the complexity of ensuring fairness, accuracy, and legal consistency. It is also important to note that appeals do not always stop all enforcement actions.
Depending on the jurisdiction and the nature of the judgment, courts may allow limited collection or restrictions to remain in place.
Understanding legal timeframes helps explain why asset-related cases often remain in the public eye for long periods.
Rather than a single decisive moment, enforcement typically unfolds in stages, guided by procedural safeguards.
In this way, appeals and delays serve a broader purpose. They help ensure that financial judgments are reviewed carefully, applied consistently, and enforced within the boundaries of due process.
This story is not just about Donald Trump.
It serves as a broader case study in how modern legal and financial systems operate when large-scale assets and complex business structures are involved. Around the world, courts are increasingly tasked with overseeing cases that involve powerful individuals, large business empires, and high-value assets. These cases test the ability of legal systems to apply rules consistently, regardless of public profile or economic influence. At this level, financial accountability becomes more than a private matter. It intersects with regulatory standards, market confidence, and public trust in legal institutions. When courts review major financial disputes, they are not only resolving individual cases, they are reinforcing how enforcement works across the system. Large business empires often consist of layered ownership structures, multiple subsidiaries, and long-term contractual obligations.
Managing enforcement in these environments requires careful coordination between courts, financial institutions, regulators, and sometimes international partners.
The goal is to ensure that judgments are enforceable without creating unnecessary disruption.
Cases involving high-value assets also highlight the importance of transparency. Financial disclosures, asset valuations, and compliance reporting are tools used to clarify what exists, who controls it,
and how obligations can be met. These mechanisms are essential for maintaining fairness when the scale of assets involved is significant. Importantly, these processes are not designed for any one individual. They apply equally to corporate leaders, investors, executives, and organizations across industries. The visibility of well-known figures can make these systems more noticeable, but the underlying principles remain the same. Understanding how enforcement works at this level helps explain why legal outcomes often take time. Complexity increases with scale, and careful review is necessary to protect the rights of all parties involved. This includes creditors, employees, partners, and other stakeholders who may be indirectly affected. Beyond individual outcomes, these cases contribute to broader legal precedents. They influence how future disputes are handled and how financial accountability is interpreted in practice. Over time, this shapes expectations around compliance and responsibility in large-scale business operations. Ultimately, examining cases like this provides insight into how power, money, and law interact. It shows how systems are structured to balance authority with accountability and influence with oversight. By understanding these processes, viewers gain a clearer picture of how financial responsibility is enforced at the highest levels, not as an exception, but as part of an established legal framework. Asset seizure is not about politics. It is about legal structure, financial accountability, and enforcement mechanisms. Whether the individual is a business owner, a corporation, or a former president, the system follows defined rules and procedures. Understanding those rules helps us better understand how power, money, and law intersect in the modern world. If you found this breakdown informative, consider liking the video or subscribing for more neutral, documentary-style analysis.